In today's age, when you hear the name Blizzard, your first thoughts are probably Overwatch or World of Warcraft, and we honestly can't blame you. With Overwatch being a must-have game for FPS fans since its release last year, and World of Warcraft being around for the past 13 years with ever-growing expansions, it's no surprise that Blizzard consistently releases blockbuster games. One series that isn't nearly as popular is Diablo. With the third installment released only 5 years ago, you don't really hear the constant chatter like you do with World of Warcraft. So we decided to go back and look where the series started. Today, we're going to look at the port of the first Diablo for the PlayStation 1. Game creator David Brevik originally thought of the name Diablo when he lived at the base of Mount Diablo located in Danville, California. He stated that the name stuck with him, and he didn't even know that it meant devil in Spanish until later down the road. The original concept for Diablo was for it to be a turn-based RPG similar to Rogue or NetHack, with claymation-style graphics inspired by Primal Rage. Brevik also wanted to incorporate expansion packs similar to Magic the Gathering, which would be located at cash registers in supermarkets. He also wanted to include permadeath as well, but this idea was quickly forgotten about as it would have been extremely punishing for players. This feature was later added as hardcore mode. Brevik's company Condor pitched the idea to Blizzard using XCOM as an example of what the game could look like, which won Blizzard over and development began. After a year of development, Blizzard suggested that the game be real-time fighting instead of turn-based, along with adding a multiplayer mode. Although Brevik was very reluctant to make these changes, the rest of his team voted to go ahead with the new ideas. The game's UI was inspired by Doom in terms of the game's menus. The idea behind this was to make a game that players could jump right into without having to learn a lot. The in-game map was inspired by Dark Forces. When looking back at all of their ideas, you can tell that they just picked a bunch of games they liked and tried to combine all of the ideas into one game. Towards the end of development, Blizzard sent several employees from its Blizzard South office to help meet the deadlines for the game. This new team worked on finishing BattleNet and preparing Diablo for multiplayer gameplay. At this point in the process, there wasn't even any code written for the multiplayer. In November of 1996, a pre-alpha demo was released through PC Gamer. We played the PlayStation port, released in 1998, 2 years after the original PC release. It went through many changes to work on console, including the obvious removal of online play. The port, however, was infamous for needing 10 blocks of the 15 blocks available on PlayStation memory cards. When we load up the game, we are treated to a very strange and creepy intro video. This video really doesn't tell us anything about what's going on, but it really sets the tone to the style of gameplay you're about to experience. As for the story, it's actually quite involved. The Lord of Terror, also known as Diablo, was originally captured by a group of monks led by Jared Kane, and his soul stone was buried in a cave. Over several centuries, the Soulstone prison weakened. Everything goes downhill when the Northern Lord Leoric arrives in Tristram and announces he is king. Diablo sees this as an opportunity and tries to possess him, but Leoric is too powerful and withstands the attempt. Even though he was able to fight off Diablo, he is driven mad and starts killing anyone who opposes him. His trusted advisor, Archbishop Lazarus, then kidnaps Leoric's son to be possessed by Diablo, which causes Leoric to go completely insane. When Leoric is finally killed, he curses his followers and eventually is resurrected as the Skeleton King. This is where we come in, the hero of the game. We start in Tristram and must travel to several dungeons beneath the cathedral to fight off the evils within. At the lowest level of the dungeon is Hell, and it's up to us to get there to reach Diablo and defeat him once and for all. The game ends with the hero defeating Diablo's mortal form and trapping him again in the Soulstone. The hero then stabs him or herself in the head with the Soulstone in order to contain the demon and bring him to the Sages of the East. Along our journey, we also learn that Diablo has killed our family, which is the drive and motivation for our character to keep pushing on. The story was also changed during the development phase. The original story made Diablo literally the devil, even though he's represented this way in the final product anyways. And the hero's motivation to kill Diablo had more of a backstory. One of the biggest changes to the original story was the ending. It was intended to be open-ended, which would allow for different themes in sequels. This was changed when the team received the final cinematic a month before release and realized it wasn't what they wanted. The hero was always intended to die at the end, and since time clearly wasn't on their side, they had to deal with this major change. Senior designer Eric Schaefer has said, quote, "It was just weird enough, and it was too late to do anything else." The backstory and lore to Diablo is actually very in-depth, and as you play through the later games, the story only goes deeper and deeper. We left a lot of the finer details out, and in all honesty, this story puts Metal Gear Solid and all the other games we covered to shame. If you have never played any of the Diablo games and would like to know every detail for what the story has to offer, we recommend you read the vast amount of information available on the internet. The graphics are actually quite impressive. Though one would assume that the PC version has better graphics, the PlayStation port is right up there with it. Each dungeon is tweaked a little bit so you don't feel as if you're always in the same area, and the procedurally generated dungeons mean you're guaranteed to have a different experience every single time you start up a new game. The music is very basic, but it does its job at setting the tone for each level. When you're in the town, you get a medieval folk-sounding song, which seems very fitting considering the time period that this takes place. The dungeons provide very eerie and drony music. This really sets the environment quite well and isn't too over the top. Diablo is an action role-playing game, where you simply select the class of character you would like to be and head off into the world. There are 3 classes to choose from: Warrior, Rogue, and Sorcerer. In this playthrough, I went with the Warrior and Mike chose the Sorcerer. Each class has specific strengths and weaknesses, as with all RPGs, so choosing your character comes down to what you feel the most comfortable with. When in the town, there are several NPCs scattered about to aid you on your journey. Some of these NPCs include Adria the Witch, who sells books, mana, and staffs, Griswold the Blacksmith, who sells and repairs weapons, and Pepin the Healer, who sells healing potions and scrolls. Several other NPCs provide the story to you, and occasionally will offer side quests for you to take. While your main goal is to kill Diablo, you'll also be tasked with killing the Butcher and the Skeleton King. There are 16 levels of dungeons, with the themes changing after every 4 levels. As you continue to travel deeper into Hell, the enemies obviously become stronger and stronger. The first level of every new area also provides a direct exit to town. This comes in handy a lot, and prevents you from getting annoyed of traveling up several dungeons just to buy more potions. If you select the Sorcerer as your character, you'll eventually learn a spell that creates a portal to the town. When in an emergency situation, this spell is extremely handy. While exploring the dungeons, your map is extremely useful in making sure you search every corner of every room. The dungeons are decently sized, so navigating your way around without a map often leads you to go the wrong way several times, or miss a door that will take you in the right direction. Bosses also just show up out of nowhere. They obviously live on specific levels, but there's never any indication that you're about to encounter one. We honestly panicked when the Butcher came busting out of a room swinging at us, as it wasn't expected at all. Since we were completely unprepared for a boss fight, we went back up to the town to stock up on potions before going back into battle. The other boss, the Skeleton King, was another time that we were completely thrown off guard and unprepared. The Skeleton King sat in a room full of smaller skeletons, all armed with bows. We couldn't make it 2 steps into the room before we were completely drained of mana and health. This led to several deaths and several trips to town for more potions. One nice feature is that when you kill an enemy, they're dead for good. This comes in handy when you want to go back to different levels of the dungeons, since you don't have to worry about the constant onslaught of enemies coming after you. There is a downside to this though. If you completely clear out a level before heading to the next dungeon, then when you start running out of gold, you no longer have weaker enemies to kill for money. This was a huge problem for us since the Sorcerer always needed mana for spells, and the Warrior always needs health potions since he deals with close combat. And if it wasn't just the potions we needed to buy, then it was repairing the weapons used during battle. We're honestly not even sure if we were playing the game the right way. Is it all about resource management? Are there areas or quests that we missed that would award us more gold? Or is it just a combination of those 3 things? I really don't know, but it got to the point for us where we just couldn't really do much more in the game. As we mentioned earlier, the dungeons are procedurally generated with every new game that you start. However, that's not the only thing that changes. In single player mode, your quests are pulled from a quest pool with 3 core quests always being involved. This means that it's literally impossible to play every single quest the game has to offer in one playthrough. Instead, you have to play for a very long time to see everything. Aside from the 3 core quests, the procedurally generated maps and quests mean no 2 playthroughs are exactly the same. It's very clear that Blizzard intends for players to enjoy this game for a very long time. With the randomly generated maps and quests, Blizzard really went above and beyond with this game in providing a lasting experience for the player. The difficulty, however, ramps up almost immediately. As you can tell, we never showed any footage of the Diablo fight, and that's because we never made it there. There's one level that made us just say, fuck this, we're done. And here it is. When we reached this point, we ended up using a Game Shark to at least get enough footage for the rest of the game, but ultimately had to make the decision to just cut it short. When making these videos, we often have to make certain decisions such as, is it really worth it to keep going? And we figured we had plenty of footage to show off this game the best we could. Although we always push to finish a game for the sake of content, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. This is the very first game we had to back away from before finishing. We also have to take a step back from our personal experiences and look at the games we play as a whole. There was a lot of back and forth between Mike and I on whether or not this game held up or not, but when we look at everything this game has to offer, it's quite clear that even though we're not very good at it, it still holds up and was very fun to play while it lasted. We may have to revisit this game at a later time to see if we can finally beat it.
Wow!